There are people who live entire lives as someone they never chose to be. They wear names that feel borrowed, smile in ways that please others. And when the night turns quiet, they feel a faint ache, a silence where their real voice should have been. The tragedy of the unchosen self is not a single moment of loss. It is the slow erosion of authenticity, an identity built from pleasing, adapting, surviving. You learn early that being loved means being small. That peace is earned by disappearing into what others expect. And yet somewhere deep beneath the practiced gestures and learned smiles, the real self waits. Unaged, unspoken, and still hoping to be found. This is the story of that quiet waiting, of the human cost of never becoming who you truly are. It never happens all at once. The loss of the self is not a dramatic collapse, but a quiet rearranging. One compromise here, one swallowed word there, a moment of pretending to agree, a smile that conceals discomfort. And soon the distance between who you are and who you appear to be becomes wide enough to get lost in. It often begins early, before language can name what is happening. A child learns that certain versions of themselves are easier to love. That their laughter is welcomed, but their anger is not. That curiosity is praised, but only if it fits the comfort of adults. And so, little by little, they begin to trade parts of themselves for belonging. At first, it feels harmless. To be good, to be quiet, to not cause trouble. But in that quietness, something fundamental begins to dim. The spontaneous spark, the one that says this is me, is slowly replaced by a performance of what others find acceptable. This is how the self disappears, not through force, but through adaptation. Children are intelligent in ways language cannot measure. They read tone, atmosphere, disappointment. They know without being told when love is conditional. And so they learn the choreography of approval, the right words, the safe gestures, the proper tone. It feels safe to become what is wanted. It feels like survival because, in many ways, it is. The need to belong is as vital as the need to breathe. But in that safety lies the seed of a lifelong tragedy. Because every time you silence what is real, you make the world a little quieter around your truth. And soon you forget what your truth even sounded like. Adulthood arrives and the performance deepens. You choose careers that impress, not ones that call to you. You maintain relationships that validate, not ones that nourish. You tell stories about who you are, stories carefully crafted to fit expectations. And yet in quiet moments when the roles fall away, you feel an unplaceable ache. A sense that something precious has gone missing, though you can't remember where you last saw it. That ache is the voice of the unchosen self. The one that never got to grow in daylight. The one that still exists, silently watching you live a life it never asked for. You see this tragedy everywhere, people who have become fluent in suppression. They smile through fatigue, they agree through resentment, they succeed yet feel hollow. It's not that they don't feel, they feel too much but have nowhere to put it. Their emotions live in the cracks between words, in the tension between who they are and who they pretend to be. And when life slows down, when the noise of work and distraction fades, the silence becomes unbearable. That is when the question begins to surface, whose life am I really living? But few have the courage to answer. Because to admit that the life you built was not truly yours is to face the fear of starting over. To look at the faces around you, the ones who love the version you perform, and realize they may not love what's underneath. So most people stay. They perfect the act. They call it being responsible, or keeping the peace, or being realistic. But underneath those words is grief, the kind that has no funeral. The kind that lingers quietly every time you say yes when you mean no. The unchosen self doesn't die, it waits. It waits in the places you avoid, silence, solitude, stillness. It waits in the dreams you dismiss as impractical. In the people who make you feel seen, even briefly. It waits for the moment when exhaustion outpaces fear. That moment is not yet here. This is still the time of disappearance, the long shadow before awakening. The phase of life where one becomes fluent in pretending. And though it feels safe, something sacred is being lost. The right to live as yourself. If the quiet disappearance begins in childhood, then this is the blueprint that keeps it standing. The invisible architecture built from approval. Every person constructs their identity inside this structure, learning which parts of themselves earn warmth and which bring withdrawal. And once the mind connects love to performance, the pattern becomes almost impossible to unlearn. Approval is an ancient currency. It's how tribes once ensured safety. To be accepted meant protection, to be rejected meant death. That instinct never left the human nervous system. Even now, the fear of disapproval doesn't just sting, it threatens something primal. So people adapt, they bend their edges, they mimic the rhythms of the group. Because somewhere deep in the body, being unloved still feels like danger. It starts with small, unspoken bargains. A child receives praise for doing something right and feels the light of belonging. They sense the pride in their parents' eyes, the ease in the room. That feeling is addictive. It teaches the body that love is not unconditional, it must be earned. And the way to earn it is to become what others prefer. Soon good becomes a disguise. It hides fear, resentment, confusion. It hides the parts of the self that once spoke too loudly or felt too deeply. The child learns to monitor every emotional expression. Will this make them happy? Will this make them turn away? These questions become the foundation of their adult psychology. And even when they grow older, they continue to ask them, at work, in love, in friendships. It's not conscious anymore. It's a reflex. Some people mistake this for kindness. They think of themselves as empathetic, flexible, easygoing. But beneath that lies a nervous system trained to equate disagreement with abandonment. They cannot stand the tension of disappointing others. So they say yes when they mean maybe. They agree when they want a question. They smile when their hearts are weary. And society rewards them for it. The agreeable ones rise smoothly through systems built on compliance. They are called team players, reliable, low maintenance. But the cost is invisible. Each praise for being adaptable reinforces the false equation. That peace comes from pleasing. Approval works like an emotional drug. It soothes in the short term, but creates dependency in the long run. Each hit of validation relieves anxiety for a moment, then deepens the craving for more. The more you receive it, the more fragile your sense of self becomes without it. And soon, silence feels like rejection. Disagreement feels like threat. The absence of praise feels like failure. This is how people become prisoners of perception. They spend their lives performing roles that secure external love, but internally they grow restless, because the human spirit can only stay confined for so long. There comes a quiet resentment, a fatigue that no amount of success can soothe. They look in the mirror and see someone everyone likes, but no one truly knows. And beneath that reflection is a deeper truth. When you live for approval, you begin to vanish from your own life. You stop asking what you want because you're busy anticipating what others need. You stop feeling what's true because truth risks disconnection. Eventually, your identity becomes a collage of borrowed opinions. Every choice is filtered through the imagined gaze of others. You dress for them, you speak for them, you think for them. And one day you realize you don't know what you like anymore. The architecture of approval stands tall, elegant, and suffocating. It promises safety, but it steals aliveness. Because the deeper tragedy is not just losing the authentic self, it's forgetting that you ever had one. In this chapter of life, approval is still mistaken for love. It feels necessary, noble even. But soon the cracks will begin to show. Because no matter how sturdy the structure appears, the foundation beneath it is made of fear. And fear cannot hold a soul forever. Every adaptation begins as protection. When the real self senses threat, emotional, social, or physical, it builds a mask. A gentler voice, a calmer expression, a more acceptable version of truth. Psychology calls this the false self, a construction the mind creates to survive when being authentic feels unsafe. Donald Winnicott, the British psychoanalyst who coined the term, believed that the false self emerges not from malice but from necessity. When a child's spontaneous emotions are not met with understanding, they learn to conceal them. If crying leads to punishment, they learn silence. If joy brings rejection, they learn restraint. They adapt because the psyche values connection more than honesty. This adaptation can be subtle and functional. It allows people to navigate complex social worlds, to build relationships, to belong. But when it becomes the dominant identity, when the mask fuses with the face, the self begins to fracture. Neuroscience helps explain this fracture in modern terms. The brain's reward system releases dopamine when social approval is received, reinforcing the pattern of people-pleasing. Simultaneously, the threat system, the amygdala, activates when disapproval or conflict arises, flooding the body with anxiety. Over time, this cycle teaches the nervous system to equate authenticity with danger and conformity with safety. You begin to live as two people, the one who feels and the one who performs. The first grows quieter each year, buried beneath the routines of the second. Eventually, you forget that the performing self was ever a choice. It feels like who you are. The false self is sophisticated. It learns your surroundings and speaks their language fluently. It knows when to nod, when to smile, when to soften the truth so others feel comfortable. It becomes charming, competent, likable. But beneath that competence lies a quiet fatigue, the effort of maintaining a character that was never meant to be permanent. Psychologists call this self-alienation, the state of being emotionally estranged from your inner world. People describe it as emptiness, numbness, or the sense of being an observer in their own life. They function but feel detached. They achieve but feel undeserving. Because deep down, success earned through performance cannot feed the hunger for authenticity. The false self is not evil, it's adaptive. It exists because once it was the only way to stay connected. In many cases, it even protects the psyche from breaking under rejection or shame. But as adulthood unfolds, the same walls that once kept pain out now keep aliveness in. Inside those walls, emotions lose their sharpness. Desires blur, choices feel mechanical. You may wake each day with the eerie sensation of being off, a life slightly misaligned, like a beautiful song played in the wrong key. And though others may see success, internally there is a whisper of dissonance. This isn't me. Research in self-determination theory explains why. Humans require 3 psychological nutrients to thrive: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. When autonomy, the freedom to be oneself, is missing, no amount of competence or connection can fill the void. You can be loved deeply and still feel unseen. You can be surrounded by people and still feel alone, because they love the version of you that is always performing. This disconnection creates what some psychologists call identity fatigue, the exhaustion that comes from sustaining an untrue persona. It's not burnout from work, it's burnout from pretending. And it manifests quietly: irritability, detachment, loss of joy in things once loved. The false self was built to protect you, but protection and aliveness cannot coexist forever. Eventually, the mask becomes too heavy. The mind begins to rebel, subtly at first, with daydreams, irritations, long silences. And soon the cracks begin to show. That rebellion, the faint stirring of something real beneath the persona, is not destruction. It is the beginning of return. Because even after years of performance, the authentic self does not disappear. It waits, patient and unharmed, beneath the scaffolding of adaptation. And one day, when the cost of pretending outweighs the comfort of belonging, it begins to No. There comes a point when the performance can no longer sustain itself. The mask begins to tremble, not because the world demands its removal, but because something inside you finally does. The false self, once a guardian, becomes a cage. And within it, the authentic self begins to stir, softly at first, like a forgotten song returning to memory. This is the moment when life starts to feel divided. Two selves moving in opposite directions, each insisting they are the real one. The outer self wants control. It needs to maintain the life it built, relationships, routines, reputations. It knows the language of order, politeness, stability. It fears what will happen if the truth takes over. The inner self, meanwhile, wants freedom. It longs to speak unfiltered, to move without permission, to breathe without apology. It has been silent for too long, and silence always turns into grief. The conflict between these two selves is not visible to others. It plays out quietly in indecision, fatigue, and sudden waves of sadness. You start questioning everything that once felt certain. A job that looked perfect now feels hollow. A relationship that once felt safe now feels suffocating. You can't explain it logically, but something inside you keeps whispering, "This isn't right." Psychologists call this the fragmentation of identity. The conscious mind is torn between the comfort of familiarity and the ache for authenticity. Part of you still wants to please, another part is tired of disappearing. It's not that you've become lost, it's that two versions of you are fighting to live in the same skin. The mind resists change through subtle sabotage. It floods you with guilt. It tells you you're ungrateful for what you have. It whispers that authenticity is selfish, that peace comes from compliance. But these are the lies of survival, not of truth. They were born in the days when approval was a lifeline. The real tragedy of this civil war is its quietness. No one sees it. On the outside, you look composed, responsible, perhaps even happy. Inside, you're split down the middle, one side trying to keep life together, the other trying to fall apart in peace. And in that tension, exhaustion grows. You wake up tired even after sleep. You smile, but the muscles ache. You listen to others, but cannot hear yourself anymore. This is the psychic cost of being two people at once. Sometimes the authentic self tries to speak through symptoms instead of words. Through anxiety that has no clear cause. Through depression that doesn't respond to logic. Through creative impulses that feel urgent but inexplicable. These are not flaws, they are attempts at communication. The self is saying, "I am still here, don't forget me." But the performing self fears this voice. It calls it weakness, instability, chaos. It worries that if the mask cracks, everything will collapse. So it clings harder to productivity, to image, to control. It tries to drown the noise with busyness, distraction, or external validation. And for a while it works. Until one day it doesn't. Because the human soul can tolerate many forms of pain, but not the pain of pretending forever. That is the deepest exhaustion of all, to be known by everyone but yourself. The inner civil war reaches its quiet peak when the cost of the mask finally becomes visible. You realize that peace built on performance is not peace, it's paralysis. And beneath the exhaustion, a small clarity begins to form. That maybe the collapse you've been fearing is not the end of you, but the beginning of your return. That realization will soon demand courage. Because to choose the authentic self means dismantling everything built upon its absence. It means breaking the architecture of approval, brick by brick. But before that liberation can begin, there must first be fracture. A moment when the mask finally cracks and what's real begins to pour through. It never announces itself with clarity. There's no grand revelation or cinematic shattering of glass. The moment of fracture often comes quietly, like a faint tremor beneath the surface of an ordinary day. Perhaps it begins with a sentence you can't finish, a project you can't force yourself to care about, A friendship that feels strangely hollow. You can't name it, but something has shifted. The old rhythm no longer fits. At first, you try to fix it the way you've always fixed everything, by adjusting, performing, controlling. You double down on the persona that has always worked. You smile harder, work longer, say the right things. But this time, the mask doesn't hold. There's a quiet rebellion underneath it, a refusal that wasn't there before. It feels like fatigue, but it's not. It's the soul's protest against living as someone it didn't choose. The fracture usually begins where you least expect it. In a loss, a heartbreak, a failure, or even a moment of deep loneliness. These experiences strip away the illusions that once kept the false self intact. When you lose what defined you, your role, your image, your control, there's nothing left to hide behind. And in that nakedness, something real begins to surface. It's disorienting at first. The performing self starts to panic. It tries to rebuild the old story. Be strong, stay composed, don't fall apart. But the old story doesn't soothe anymore, it stings. Because you've begun to see how much of your life was spent rehearsing instead of living. The mind calls it a breakdown, but the heart knows it's a breakthrough. The false self calls it failure, but the deeper self calls it freedom. Psychologists describe this stage as ego death, the dissolution of the identity you once mistook for yourself. It feels terrifying because the ego's survival depends on certainty, and authenticity offers none. You begin to question everything. Who am I without what I do? Who am I when no one is watching? What do I truly want if approval is no longer the compass? The answers come slowly and not always gently. They arrive in fragments through tears, silence, sleepless nights. Through moments of deep emptiness that feel endless but are in truth the clearing of space. Space for something new to grow. In this in-between place, you are no longer who you were, but not yet who you will be. You're standing at the threshold between illusion and truth. And that's what makes this moment sacred. There's a raw beauty in fracture, the kind that can't be seen from the outside. To others, it may look like collapse, but inwardly, it's a reckoning. You start to notice the faint pulse of your real voice returning. Timid yet honest. It trembles when it speaks, but it speaks. It no longer wants perfection, it wants peace. Healing from this point does not begin with action, it begins with surrender. The acceptance that the mask has served its purpose, and that it's time to let it die. It's painful, yes, because part of you still grieves the identity you built. The one that earned you love, respect, stability. But grief is the price of truth. Every authentic life begins with a loss, the loss of who you were pretending to be. You may find yourself crying for no clear reason, or feeling a strange tenderness toward your own pain. That tenderness is the birth of compassion, the self finally turning toward itself. It's the first sign that the fracture has not destroyed you. It has simply revealed what was hidden beneath. And once you see that the world doesn't end when the mask falls, something miraculous happens. You stop fearing the collapse. You begin to understand that what's breaking is not your life, it's your disguise. This is the beginning of re-entry. The first breath of the unchosen self returning home. After the fracture, there is quiet. Not the peaceful kind, but the hollow, uncertain stillness that follows a storm. The world feels slower, heavier. And yet within that silence, something sacred begins, the slow return to the self that was left behind. The return doesn't begin with triumph. It begins with disorientation. You no longer fit into the life that once felt safe. Conversations feel rehearsed. Work feels like mimicry. Even your reflection looks slightly unfamiliar. It's as if you've been emptied out, waiting to see what will rise to fill the space. This is the moment most people try to rush. They want clarity, direction, a new identity to replace the old. But the authentic self does not respond to control. It doesn't arrive on command, it unfolds slowly in the quiet rhythm of truth. The return is less about becoming something new and more about remembering what you always were. The parts that were silenced begin to reappear. The curiosity that was called distraction. The anger that was labeled disrespect. The sensitivity that was mistaken for weakness. They surface one by one, tentative and fragile, like wildflowers blooming in abandoned ground. At first, it's uncomfortable. You don't yet know how to live without the mask. The world you built around performance expects consistency. It rewards predictability. When you begin to show your real self, some people pull away. They miss the version of you that never disagreed, never said no, never felt too deeply. And that hurts, because you realize how many relationships were built on your silence. But this pain is the price of authenticity. To live as yourself means accepting that not everyone will stay. It means losing the comfort of universal approval. It means trusting that honesty, even when it costs you love, will always lead you closer to freedom. Psychologically, this stage mirrors what Carl Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating the parts of the self that were once denied. You begin to see that your so-called flaws were never flaws, they were disowned strengths. Your anger becomes clarity. Your sensitivity becomes empathy. Your solitude becomes peace. The return to the unchosen self is not about defiance, it's about reconciliation. You are not rejecting the world, you are simply choosing not to abandon yourself for it. You begin to treat your inner life not as a weakness to hide, but as a landscape to explore. You start noticing the subtle ways you self-abandoned, apologies you didn't owe, emotions you suppressed, needs you minimized. And in that noticing, something beautiful happens. Compassion replaces shame. Healing is not linear here. There are days when you still reach for the mask. Days when silence feels safer than truth. But slowly the balance shifts. You begin to speak even when your voice shakes. You begin to rest without guilt. You begin to choose things not for how they look, but for how they feel. And with each small act of honesty, the self remembers itself more clearly. It's not about grand reinvention, it's about subtle realignment. You stop living from obligation and start living from essence. You learn to sit in your own company without the need to perform. You begin to feel a strange lightness, not because life is easier, but because it's finally real. The return is not dramatic. It's quiet, grounded, deeply human. You find beauty in imperfection again. You laugh without measuring it. You cry without shame. And somewhere in the middle of an ordinary day, you feel something you haven't felt in years. A sense of home within your own skin. The unchosen self was never gone. It was waiting patiently for you to stop running. And when you finally turn toward it, you realize, all along it wasn't you that needed to be chosen. It was life itself waiting to be lived truthfully. Rebirth does not arrive with fireworks. It comes softly, like dawn light touching a quiet room after a long night. There's no applause, no dramatic transformation. Only the gentle awareness that you are no longer pretending. The self, once fragmented, begins to move as one again. The voice that trembled now speaks with calm honesty. The body feels lighter, not because life has simplified, but because resistance has faded. For the first time, your emotions, actions, and words align. You feel congruent, whole in a way that cannot be measured, only sensed. This is not a return to who you were before the world shaped you. It's the integration of all that you've been, the protector, the pretender, the survivor, and the seeker. Every version of you has a place now. The false self is no longer the enemy, it's the scar that proves you endured. In this stage, authenticity no longer feels like rebellion. It feels like peace. You no longer chase approval, but neither do you reject it. You simply understand its limits. Love that demands your silence no longer feels like love. Success that cost your joy no longer feels like success. You begin to choose differently, not out of fear, but out of quiet clarity. The soft rebirth is subtle. It shows up in the smallest acts, in saying no without guilt, in resting without apology, in laughing without performance. It's the moment you stop seeking permission to exist as you are. The psychologist Abraham Maslow once wrote that self-actualization is not a goal, but a process, a continual unfolding of potential through honesty and courage. This is that unfolding. The layers of defense, fear, and shame have thinned enough for life to touch you directly again. You begin to experience the world not as an audience to impress, but as a field to belong to. Even ordinary things, a morning walk, the sound of rain, a slow conversation, feel richer, alive, with texture. And yet this rebirth is not free of loneliness. When you stop performing, you may find yourself walking paths few around you understand. But the solitude is different now. It no longer feels like exile, it feels like sanctuary. A quiet space where your inner life can breathe without fear of being edited. This is the paradox of awakening. You lose many things, illusions, comforts, certain relationships. But in that loss, you gain something deeper, intimacy with yourself. And from that intimacy, a new kind of love emerges, one not dependent on approval, but rooted in mutual truth. You can finally let others see you, not because you need them to, but because you no longer need to hide. The self you once silenced now walks beside you, unashamed, imperfect, alive. You find beauty not in perfection, but in alignment. Not in what others think of you, but in the quiet knowledge that you are living truthfully. Rebirth is not the end of struggle. It's the beginning of real participation in life. You still feel pain, fear, and doubt, but you meet them differently now. Not as enemies to escape, but as signals guiding you back toward what's real. You understand that authenticity is not a destination, it's a daily practice of remembering. And when the world grows loud again, as it inevitably will, you return to the silence inside. You the same silence that once felt empty, now filled with presence. You breathe and realize you've stopped running. This is what it means to live as the chosen self. Not to be certain, but to be sincere. Not to be perfect, but to be whole. And as you move forward, unmasked, unguarded, alive, you carry with you the quiet wisdom that the greatest act of love you can offer this world is to remain entirely, courageously yourself.